kind of slow this morning. Okay, good to go.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to everyone that's here listening to our committee meeting today on inland fisheries and wildlife. I'm Jim Dill. I'm the Senate Chair of the committee, and we will start out with introductions. So I'll just go right in order on my screen. So first I have Representative Lyford.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you. Peter Lyford, District 129, Clifton, Eddington, Holden, Northborough, and Vesey.
Representative Alley.
Yes, Representative Alley here down Jones Foot Beals area, and good morning, everyone.
Morning. Representative Mason.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Dill. I'm Rick Mason. I represent District 56, the great folks of Lisbon.
Representative Neto.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Neto. I represent District 78, which comprises of Winslow and a small portion of Benton.
Senator Black.
Good morning. Senator Black, representing Senate District 17, which is all of Franklin County and 4 towns in Kennebec County, Belgrade, Mount Vernon, Vienna, and Fayette.
Representative Hepler.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Allison Hepler. I represent the towns of Aroustic, Georgetown, Phippsburg, Woolwich, which is where I live, Dresden, and a small part of Richmond.
Senator Curry.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Senator Chip Curry, and I represent Senate District 11, which includes the 26 rural, coastal, and island communities of Waldo County.
House Chair Landry.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Dill. I'm Scott Landry. I represent District 113, the towns of Farmington and New Sharon.
Representative Terrio.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. My name is Tim Terrio. I represent District 79, which is Albion, most of Benton, China, and Unity Plantation.
And it looks like we have a new member, Representative Ordway. You look a little different this morning.
We'll fix that. Good morning. I'm Lester Ordway. I represent District 23, which is part of the town of Standish.
And I guess that's everyone. I don't think I've missed anybody. Well, again, I want to welcome everybody to our IFW committee meeting. As I mentioned, I'm Jim Dill. I represent Senate District number 5, Northern Penobscot County. And we have 3 items today. The first is a presentation and report on watercraft operation. The second is language review and work session on boating safety, LD 1663. And then finally, we'll finish up with a public hearing on LD 1873. So remember to keep yourselves muted, please, until you are called upon to speak. That way it cuts down on background noise, etc. And if you're out in the waiting room to come in, our clerk for today is Darlene Simoneau, and she will let you in when it's time to speak. Otherwise, if you have anything, all the chat is for is to provide us with information. It's not to, meaning like if you have a website or something like that that you want, that's the only thing we do with the chat. It's not to ask us questions, etc. So with that, let's see, our analyst today, where is Julia? Julia McDonald, there she is right in the middle of my screen. And with that, we will start right out with our first one, which is a presentation on watercraft operation, which was LD 349. I believe Tim Peabody is going to do that. Is that correct, Deputy Commissioner?
Good morning, Senator, Representative Landry, honorable members of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. I'm Tim Peabody, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. I'm here to report back on the department's recommendations, how to best educate the public on current laws related to safe boating in Maine, and update this committee in terms of possible ban on personal watercraft on Kai's Pond in the town of Sweden. I'm going to go over the resolve just to refamiliarize you all with it. It's stated IFW shall examine issues related to the operation of watercraft including personal watercraft, on the waters of the state, including how to best educate the public about current laws governing a safe and appropriate operation of watercraft. The department shall also monitor whether the town of Sweden votes to support prohibiting personal watercraft on Kai's Pond, and we'll report back our findings to the committee prior to March 31st. So to begin, we'll be sending you the full report after the presentation today. I'll be reading directly from the report and also summarizing various parts of the report to kind of move it along. I'm going to first go over the jurisdiction of watercraft laws in Maine. And Title 12, Part 13, and actually has two chapters, 933 and 935, basically regulating watercraft in the state of Maine. And within those chapters, the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Commissioner and the Commissioner of Marine Resources also have rulemaking authority based in statute. The specific provisions for rulemaking for the departments are administrative procedure, appointment of registration agents, safe use and operation of watercraft, safety equipment, horsepower, and areas off limits to watercraft for wildlife protection. These are the rulemaking authorities that were given to the department by the legislature. So whatever comes before us for rulemaking has to fit into one of those categories. And we get a lot of requests, primarily for horsepower, but we have other requests from people was outside the legislative session for rulemaking that we have to try to determine if it fits in one of those categories so that we can do the APA rulemaking process. Everything else in Part 13 is under the purview of your committee to make changes in law. So the department's also the Bureau of Warden Service responsible for enforcement of all these laws and department rules. And I think we all know that. I'm just refamiliarizing yourself because we're going to talk about other enforcement options for watercraft. So game wardens are the primary responders for enforcement on the waters, and they have full enforcement authority across all laws of the state, but specifically on inland waters, they're the primary responder to problems on inland waters. Other law enforcement officers, that's county sheriffs, state police, municipal officers, and harbor masters, also have the full power of game wardens when it comes to enforcing watercraft law. And I say that is, we do have some parts of the state. I know at some point in time, Cumberland County used to patrol portions of Sebago Lake. I know at different times, and the Colonel can probably answer the questions better, if any of the municipal agencies are actually on the water now. Some of them actually bought boats, but primarily due to constraints and staffing and other mandates that counties and municipal people have, they don't spend a lot of time on the water. It falls in the hands of the warden service. And inland harbor masters are also outlined in Title 12, Part 13. And it allows municipalities to also have their own enforcement, and they're completely authorized by law to enforce all the watercraft laws of the state, as well as mooring privileges and mooring ordinances in a particular community. Again, that has been on the books for approximately 30 years, and as there are a number of inland harbor masters across the state, they're very well received by the warden service because they take a lot of burden off, but is never really caught on in any great way, and has been on the books for 30 years. So that's the department's authority. The Marine Resources, they also have statewide law enforcement. They're primarily for watercraft, primarily, of course, on tidal waters. In an emergency, they may do some enforcement on inland waters, but you're going to find them on the coastal and tidal rivers in the state of Maine. So municipalities are limited on authority to regulate watercraft. They may not enact any ordinances. Again, this is spelled out in Title 12, Part 13, Section 13201. They may not enact any ordinances, laws, or rules regulating or charging fees for the operation, registration, and numbering of watercraft, or any other subject matters related to watercraft regulated under Title 12, Part 13. So municipalities are essentially extremely limited on enacting or changing any watercraft operation laws. And the reason for that is really boaters like to be able to travel pond to pond, town to town, and in a lot of senses with the Coast Guard regulations, state to state, and really expect that they understand what the laws are potentially going to be on a particular body of water. So again, that's regulated in Title 12, Part 13. So I'm going to regulating personal watercraft now. That's what I've just gone over is our baseline for all watercraft regulation. Personal watercraft, we actually have a definition of in Title 12. And that definition's been in place since the Great Pond Task Force met during the mid to late 90s. And I'll just define what it is. It's any motorized watercraft less than 14 feet or less is manufactured and is primarily source of propulsion is an inboard motor powering a jet pump, is capable of carrying one or more persons sitting or standing or kneeling. So again, this definition came out of the Great Ponds Task Force, which sat during the 1990s, and they submitted their final report to the legislature in 1999. And in that report, this is a quote from the report, the issue of personal watercraft was raised with the greatest frequency and intensity at 8 public hearings held across Maine. The result of the task force recommendations to the 118th legislature continued to be the current laws related to the use of personal watercraft that we actually live by today. Some of these examples are prudent operation of a watercraft by engaging in prolonged circling, informal racing, wake jumping, or other types of continued repeated activities that could potentially harass another person. Again, this was all enacted during that Great Pond Task Force time. They also enacted a 16-year-old age limit to operate a personal watercraft, and they also had enhanced safety and areas of prohibition for operation, which is really the focus of this report back on the Kai's Pond issue was about prohibiting watercraft on certain waters. So the current prohibitions, or many of the current prohibitions for operating a personal watercraft on certain waters, resulted from a process enacted through unallocated language in Section 17 of Public Law 1997, Chapter 739, which is an act to implement recommendations of the Great Ponds Task Force. And your report will have a link to that law. The process allowed municipalities to, this is in quotes, to make recommendations for regulating the use, operation, and type of watercraft for great ponds within organized areas of the state. And again, as I went over earlier, recommendations come to you as a committee, but you're the committee of jurisdiction that makes decisions on this. So this was a pretty big step to actually reach out to municipalities as a result of the Great Pond Task Force. I'll go over that process. So this is the language, unallocated language in Public Law 1997, Chapter 739. A municipality, with the approval of its legislative body, may submit recommendations to the Commissioner of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife for regulating the use, operation, and type of watercraft on great ponds within the jurisdiction of that municipality. For great ponds that border on more than one municipality, recommendations may be submitted only after approval by the legislative bodies of all municipalities in which those waters are located. For great ponds that border within the jurisdiction of the Maine Land Use Regulatory Commission, it's now called the Land Use Planning Commission, the approval of the commission was also required. And if a municipality chooses to prepare recommendations for such waters, it shall take into consideration the use to which those waters are put, the depth of the water, the amount of waterborne traffic on the waters, wildlife and environmental values, noise, traditional uses of the water body, and the safety of persons and property. These recommendations may be submitted only after a municipal public hearing and must include a description of the resources the municipality or municipalities will use to enforce those recommendations if enacted. So the Commissioner was directed, the Commissioner of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife was directed to submit a report to the 119th Legislature on the recommendations received from the municipalities by a certain deadline. Each report must be accompanied by legislation implementing the recommendations supported by the department. The department also at the time had the option of suggesting legislation using the same criteria that municipalities had. The department forwarded to the 119th Legislature recommendations from any municipality that followed the process, which I just outlined to you. There was no measure outlined in the process regarding the criteria, i.e. the depth of the water, the amount of waterborne traffic on the waters, wildlife environmental values, noise, traditional uses, and safety of persons and property. There were no measures, no metrics to allow the department to review the merit of the requested bans. So the department felt that without those measures, that at the time we were unable to say no. And as you know, I'm speaking as I was here during that time period. I was a colonel at that time period, working with the commissioner on this. So I know exactly how we did it. And we basically, if the municipalities followed the process, then we passed them along to the legislature. And in most cases, the lack of complaint data on these waters from the Warden Service neither justified a ban on personal watercraft nor a change to any law on the waters being discussed, because there were adequate laws already in place. Again, lack of complaints, no measures. So in addition to this process, which I just went over, Public Law 1997, Chapter 739, enacted a provision of law under the currently named Land Use Planning Commission that prohibited operating personal watercraft on certain categories of waters under the Commission's jurisdictions. At that time, when the law was implemented, over 200 waters fell into the category of prohibiting the use of personal watercraft. And these waters are currently today listed in our boating law book, which I've included a link to that in your report. So I'm going to just summarize Maine Warden Service boating enforcement right now. Each summer, each boating season, Maine wardens on average spend more than 9,000 hours a year on the water doing recreational boating enforcement. They do compliance checks on between 15 and 20,000 boaters each year. The majority of the violations detected by wardens are inadequate personal flotation devices, operating unregistered watercraft, and violations of water safety zone, which is a headway speed violation. Such violations have historically shown a consistent pattern, and I actually looked at the data that we submitted in the late 90s, and it follows the same historical pattern: life jackets, Registrations and headway speed were the primary violations back then, and they still are today. And the headway speed violations often cause public complaint as they occur close to shore and are visible to persons along the shorelines involved in other activities. Many boat operators are either inexperienced or not always aware of what headway speed means. Other more egregious operational violations, such as operating to endanger or reckless operation, consistently produce less than 5 prosecutions per year statewide. Again, that's a pretty consistent historical perspective, and those are the most egregious violations of operational law for watercraft. So for Kai's Pond, Chapter 45, the resolve directed the department to follow up with the town of Sweden on the status of municipal action regarding the banning of personal watercraft on Kai's Pond. So we contacted the town of Sweden on January 11th regarding the issue, and we still have not actually had a call back from the town. However, we did receive notification from a Mr. Andrew Black. On January 17th, we received a note from him, I personally did, that the town voted on January 11th, the select persons voted, to put on the issue of banning personal watercraft on Kai's Pond at the annual town meeting warrant. It was indicated that the town meeting would be sometime in March, and it's anticipated that a public hearing on the matter would take place sometime in February. And a check on the Warden Service records management system back to 2018 shows no watercraft-related complaints regarding Kai's Pond. So in summary, the department believes the municipal process that was used previously and presented in this report was challenging on several fronts. One, it lacked the metrics for measuring the considerations, and I'll list them again. Considerations on the uses to which the waters are put, the depth of the water, the amount of waterborne traffic on the water, wildlife and environmental values, noise, and traditional uses of the body of water, and safety of persons and property. Lacking these measures made it challenging for the department to have meaningful discussion regarding the municipal recommendations. Additionally, there were challenges with the municipal process as to who was allowed to speak at the town meetings. And we heard this again directly at the department that property owners on the waters that did not reside in the town were not allowed to speak at the town meetings. If the previous process that I explained is reinstated, we believe the municipalities do need to commit to providing inland harbor masters for enforcement. And it was part of the previous process, and anything that this committee chooses to do, we feel that that's very important to have that. So again, some metrics, allowing appropriate people to speak regarding the issue. Again, our water bodies, our great ponds are for everybody, not just property owners within a town. The department's preferred method would be to leave the current process, which is the committee, the legislature, in place, as we feel it's well-founded process, which allows full participation by both the public, the agencies regulating and enforcing the activity. In closing, the department right now has a very aggressive outreach program with our Information and Education Division, and we're actively communicating with all of our constituents right now. We communicate with our registered boaters on safe and courteous boating, and we're going to continue to develop that. But again, we're only reaching those people if they register a boat. So we feel a broader educational approach would resolve most of the problems that are being brought up, such as on Kai's Pond, a broader background for education for all boat operators is the approach to take here. So I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Representative Ordway.
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Good morning, Commissioner Peabody. My question is, and I could be wrong and often am, my understanding now that when a municipality votes to ban personal watercraft, it's throughout the whole town and not specific bodies of water. Is that the case with what we set up in the 90s?
No, it's specific bodies of water, although some of the ones, you're right, some of the ones that were set up after the Great Pond Task Force, did take in all bodies of water in particular towns. But really the process moving forward has been very specific bodies of water that have come before you as a committee over the years. But you're right, in fact, the task force provision did ban them in all towns, all waters in some towns.
Follow up if I may, Senator.
Yes.
Would that now allow towns that banned it throughout the town to pick out specific ponds that they would allow them on, or lakes?
They would have to change they would have to come back before you and actually reopen some.
Okay. So it would allow future ones to cherry pick ponds and lakes, but not go backwards.
The ones that are currently in law, and I specifically know some of them. I know that the ones I think Town of Hope in Lincolnville, in Camden, when they enacted the Great Ponds Task Force recommendation ban on personal watercraft, it took them out of all bodies of water in those towns. I know that for a fact. So they would have to come back before this committee to change that.
Thank you.
Representative Lightfoot.
Deputy Commissioner, did I understand that there's a couple hundred lakes within the state that have gone through the right process and banned personal watercraft?
So the 200 that I referenced in the report was actually within the Land Use Planning Commission jurisdiction. And that's a particular section of law. I think it's section 685, I believe. It's in the report. But that allowed the commission to ban personal watercraft on certain categories, certain classifications of waters. And basically, if a water met this classification and it's accessible only by foot access or accessible only by four-wheel drive vehicle, they have these various classifications from waters. Depending on what that classification was, it automatically took in any body of water that met that classification and banned personal watercraft on it. So the 200 number that I referenced was from the Land Use Planning Commission, Unorganized Territories.
Thank you.
Other questions? Could you tell me, and maybe you mentioned this, but since the Great Ponds Act, and I think at that time there was probably several restricted lakes and ponds that came into being at that point in time. Since then, have there been many instances like what we're dealing with today? And has this been the process that they have gone through?
This has been the process that they've gone through, and I bet you if there's been 5, I'd be shocked. There's potentially none. I could be corrected, but it's very, very, very few. And again, what this committee has deliberated on is most of the time there's been no complaints or very, very, very few. And there's adequate laws in place to address problems on bodies of water. And that's what we're kind of saying here, is there's already laws in place. If you have a problem, you can call a warden service or an inland harbor master in the community and have the problem addressed, and not create a ban. And if there's a justifiable reason for it, then, I mean, this committee deliberates all the time on justifiable reasons. And I think you're very capable of continuing to do that, but that's how it's gone before.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for Deputy Commissioner Peabody? So Julia, the posture we're in, I believe, is that we had turned this into a resolve last year, asking them to report back. Once we got the report back, we then gave ourselves the authority to report out a bill if we so desire on this particular issue that was before us. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator Dill.
Thank you. So committee, you've heard the presentation. What are your thoughts? Do we need to do a bill on this to go along with what was asked of us originally? Do we think as a committee, as was just pointed out, that there's plenty of checks and balances already in place that IFW has at their disposal? Representative Terrio.
Yeah, I believe that we have plenty in place, and I don't think we need any new bills. I think I would be for ought not to pass.
I don't believe it. Okay, thank you. Representative Lyford.
Ought not to pass would be my preference, Senator.
Representative Ordway.
Yeah, thanks, Senator. I kind of feel the same way, that without hearing from the municipality and the people in the municipality there, that we should not go forward.
Okay.
And the department has plenty of rules and regulations that can handle this.
And after they have their public hearing, et cetera, if someone wants to bring back a bill next year, that's a whole different story. So
I agree.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Senator. I agree with Lester and everybody else. I don't think we should push forward with this.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Julia, there's no action that we need to take, is there, since this was just a resolve and a report back? If we decide not to report out a bill, we're done.
The committee has discretion to report out a bill, so there's no enforcement to take action.
Okay, so I mean, we don't have to have this ought not to pass, et cetera. We're just in this posture and we move on.
That's right.
Unless we decide to pass.
Right, and if
bill.
something comes up, then we can schedule that in the future.
Yeah. Rick, excuse me, Representative Mason, do you have something else? Your hand's still up, sorry. Okay. Anyone else have anything that they want to bring up? Well, I think I'm hearing from the committee that thank you for the report, and that we just move on. Is there any objections to that? I don't see anybody saying there's any objections to that. So Julie, if that's the posture we're in, we'll file this report away, and after the municipalities have their public hearings and stuff, as I say, if someone wants to bring back a bill next year, that's entirely up to them, and we can go from there because we'll have more information and input from the municipality. Okay. All right. Thank you for the presentation. Next is language review, LD 1663. So I will open that up. And this is a language review and kind of a work session at the same time. So with that, Julie, you want to bring us up to speed, please?
Yes, so I will, once again, I will go over the language, and this is based and was put together. It's the proposed legislation from the department. And I will also go over their summary, and I'll share my screen. Any substantive questions, I will direct to the department.
Okay.
Is everyone able to see the bill?
Yes.
Great. So to begin with, what this bill uses is the recommendations of the department. These won't take effect until 2027. There is no boater safety required if the boat is under 25 horsepower. It is only applicable to inland waters. There are some age requirement changes that are reflected in the language, and the personal watercraft stays the same also, except for some age changes. So starting at the top of the bill, right here, we have a new definition of what a boater safety and education course is. And that will be what is applicable for people required to take the course. That change was reflected here. This was originally just to promote safety. It's now to promote safety and education. Next, here we see both the requirement to complete the course and also the aforementioned age changes. So next, this is an entirely new section, and what it reflects is that requirement. And again, this won't take effect until 2027, but I will give the committee a chance just to read through this. It also creates a penalty for not having that. And again, the pause is just so everyone can read it. Okay, and then what I didn't mention there is that section D here does provide exemptions for guides and those with a maritime license. And then again, this section here, what we're seeing is the reflection of age changes. So those are the changes that have happened and how the bill looks now. We did strike the carryover language in entirety and replace it with this language. And so if anyone has any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them or turn them over to the department.
Could you scroll back up to the section where they talked about who needs to have this certification here, right here? When it says you take the course, I know we talked about reciprocity, and having just quickly read the language here, it says you have to supply a certificate. So I assume that means a certificate that is from any state, which would therefore probably have had a national certification attached to that particular state. If someone was here from Massachusetts, and they were stopped and said, do you have an education certificate, a proof of education, then they would have something from Massachusetts, and we're going to accept that as long as it is nationally certified. Is that correct? I guess that's a question to the somebody, either Tim or Judy.
I can, Senator Tim Peabody, Deputy Commissioner. Yes, it's a reciprocity issue that if it's a National Association of Boating Law Administrators certified course from another state, then it's accepted in Maine.
Okay. All I'm trying to see here is I don't know if some states just have state certification that's not connected nationally in any way. Do you know if that is the case? And therefore, like I know you mentioned earlier that we have 4 boater education courses. Now, if I had taken one of those and I was in a state that had something similar to this, would have I had anything from the state of Maine saying that I had gone through one of those courses and therefore I was okay in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Tennessee or whatever.
Yes, that would be correct. If you had taken a course that it was certified by the association, then you would be compliant in another state.
Okay.
Actually, voting in the Northeast, Maine people, if they do leave the state, are the ones that are actually operating without certificates, because most of the other states around us already require that certification.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Landry.
Thank you, Senator Dill. Similar to your question, the verification of the completion, are they going to have to carry paper with them? Will you have access to electronic data that, you got a 17-year-old who says he has taken the course? How does he have to prove it? Does he have to carry paper or electronic?
Representative, Commissioner, you want to take that? Or?
No, it's fine. Deputy, go ahead. I mean, I was just going to say that, I think it would be very similar to being able to provide your registration or your driver's license. I believe Warden Service would accept an electronic, a digital representation, a photograph in their phone or something like that. But yeah, people will, as they have to carry their driver's license and their motor vehicle insurance card in their vehicle, they will have to have proof with them that they have taken this class. And I think the colonel could attest to this has not been an issue in other states. He reached out to many other states to talk about how they deal with this. And, the feedback he received was basically just that, people carry it just like they do their boat keys.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Representative Lightfoot.
Deputy Commissioner, should we also include the word country? Such a large portion of our border is Canadian. Do we have a Canadian influx of boaters?
As Representative Lightfoot, we certainly do. I don't know if the colonel's on or not, but there is there's a Canadian course that's actually certified by the Association of Boating Administrators too. I don't know if he's on here and able to speak.
Darlene, could you let in Dan Scott, please?
Sure.
And we'll come back to that question, representatives, when she comes in. I'll go on to Representative Hepler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Other than a couple of typos, because the teacher hat is back on my head, can you explain, I went through here and I saw age of 18, age of 12, age of 17. Can you just kind of give me an overview of what this all entails? Because maybe when I read it in a piece of paper, it'll be different, but thanks.
Sure. Would you like me to answer that, Representative Hepler? Okay, so the way we have it drafted right now is it's over 25 horsepower, and anybody 12 and older has to have a boater education course. The way the law currently is if you're 12 or older now, you can operate a boat of any size without any education course. So we wanted to keep the ages consistent. So if you're 12 or older, you have to have a boater education course. If you're under 12, current law is now, it would be you can't operate a boat of more than 10 horsepower. If you want to, say a 10-year-old wants to operate a 25 horsepower boat or a 30 horsepower boat, then the accompanying adult who needs to be at least 18 would have to have boater education. So we tried to not to vary it as to vary it as little as we could from the current law. We put the 25 horsepower restriction on there because a lot of folks run smaller motors, 9.9, 7 horsepower, and at this point, boater education wouldn't apply to them. But we're keeping it the same at 12 years old, similar to how the law is now. The last piece that you saw under 16, that's also current law. That's specific to personal watercrafts. So all the way down at the bottom, the personal watercraft law Currently, if you're 16 or 17, you need to take boater education to run a personal watercraft, a jet ski, so to speak. So we lifted that upper age limit. So now when this takes effect, anyone 16 and older would have to have boater education to run their personal watercraft. So currently it's 16 and 17-year-olds. In the future, it would be everyone 16 and older. And that law is also currently in place. It's a little bit higher standard for PWCs.
Thanks.
Hope that was
Representative Lightfoot, do you want to ask your question again?
Yes.
referring to the Canadian.
Yes.
I was in the waiting room. I just wasn't able to get in. Yeah, so in Canada, they have what's called a Canadian Pleasure Craft certification. And that course, which grants Canadians that certification, is also certified by NASBLA, which is our national certification. So anybody who showed up here, say there are a fair number of bass fishermen that come in from New Brunswick or Quebec, if they showed their Canadian Pleasure Craft card, because that's a NASBLA certified course, that would be accepted.
Thank you.
Representative Landry.
Thank you, Senator Dill. Regarding Canada and surrounding states, how close do these regulations fit with those of other governments?
Okay, so similar to driving, most of the boating laws across the country are just about identical. There are some, pieces that are state specific. But as far as rules of the road and safety equipment that's required and registrations, in order to qualify for the federal grant money that most states operate under, they have to comply by the federal boating standards for, let's say, life jackets or fire extinguishers or whistles, et cetera. So there are many courses across the country that are NASBLA certified by the National Association of Boating Law Administrators. Most of the instruction of those, in order to be NASBLA certified, they have to meet their policy and their standard of content. So if somebody were to come here from the state of Florida, probably 90% of the course that they took down there that was NASBLA certified would be the same as a Maine specific course that we had up here. What we would add for Maine specific information would be things like potentially headway speed, or if we have specific surface water use requirements due to invasive species, so to speak. But the bulk of it, the federal guidelines for operating a boat are consistent, and most states have adopted those same standards. And that's why we're using the NASBLA certified course, because they use information based on the federal standards to make sure everybody has the same basic background in boat operation.
Senator Dill?
Yes.
Follow up. So the age requirements and size requirements, motor size, are the same or similar?
The ages are very similar. The motor size requirements does vary across the country. When I provided my report back last week, I included some links where you can look at other states and see exactly what their motor safety requirements are. Some of them don't have a motor restriction. We heard from the committee during the report back fairly clearly that they kind of wanted us to maybe step into this a little bit. That's why we set out the 5-year implementation date, as well as 25 horsepower. Maine does have a lot of very small lakes and ponds, some of which are quite remote. And many of us operate 7 horsepower, 9.9 horsepower tiller drives, 15s. So, and they really, in my experience, aren't the source of the complaints that we're trying to deal with the bigger, faster boats causing wake issues. Granted, they do cause some issues, but it's usually the bigger, faster, heavier boats that cause the issues. So in an effort to ease our way into this, we set the horsepower standard at 25 horsepower. There are other states that have horsepower restrictions. Some are 25, some are more, some are 15. The age requirements are pretty similar across the country because they track the federal guidelines.
Thank you very much.
Both for PWC and for motorboats.
Thank you.
Actually, we at one point had talked about making a minimum age of 16 and we consulted with the folks from NASBLA, they actually recommended sticking with our current language at 12, because that's what many of the other states have in place, and that's kind of the national standard.
Right.
Representative Ordway.
Yes, thanks, Senator. Good morning, Colonel. I'm kind of torn on this, not really torn, but kind of. Has there been any talk or consideration to grandfathering in some of the people? I mean, if a Maine resident has been operating his 35 horsepower boat for 50 years without incident, and now we want to mandate that he takes a safety course, just my thoughts, I guess.
Sure, there's been quite a bit of discussion around who are the persons responsible for generating the complaints, and hence this discussion and legislation. So keep in mind, as the Deputy Commissioner had mentioned earlier, and through our consultation with the national organization, most states in the country have mandatory boater education as part of their state statutes. Most of them have been in place for quite some time, and most of them require it of all boaters. As far as the age, grandfathering with age, we don't find that it's any particular age cohort that's part of the issue, so to speak, or the challenge. It's more of a horsepower size. And that's why through our discussions, we thought that, eliminating some of the smaller horsepower motors, which many of the folks that operate boats throughout Maine, they only operate a smaller horsepower motor, that would, I don't want to say grandfather them, but exclude them. But there are numbers and numbers of people at all age classes that operate their boats intentionally or not intentionally in a manner that probably some education would help them. And really, a lot of people look at it, we've been approached and said, well, if I've been operating my boat for 45 years, I'm 55 years old. In many cases, it's the older group that can afford the boats that are big enough and fast enough to cause an issue. And quite frankly, I think the administration of how long you've owned a boat for, who's registered it, et cetera, would be kind of challenging to track. It's easier just to require the boating education. That's one of the reasons we put it out 5 years. It would give all these folks a chance, over the next 5 years to sit down and take an online course. Isn't too much to ask, or if they're unable to get the online course, they could take an in-person course.
Representative Ordway.
Yeah, I guess my thought on that is that I would venture a guess that the vast majority of boaters in Maine follow the rules. And we're trying to do something that affects everybody for a certain segment of the population that don't follow the rules. Again, torn on this issue a lot.
Sure, and I appreciate that, Representative Ordway. However, the only comment I'd make is one, we're not way out in front of this. If anything, we're a little bit behind the rest of the country, most of the boaters, and we register about 120-some thousand boats a year. Some bigger states, recreational boating states, register upwards of 1 million. So this isn't across the country. This isn't unprecedented by any means. And lost my train of thought there for a minute. What you were getting at? As far as the folks, you are correct. Most of the boaters we run into do operate responsibly and within the guides of the law. The ones that aren't, I'm not positive that it's an intentional act. We think more it's a lack of knowledge, and that's why we ask to approach this through a boater education process. And we think that over the next 5 years, if we get the majority of the boaters to go through boater education, that may take care of some of the headway speed violations and the people not being responsible for their wake or boating near swimming areas. I think it's a naivety or a lack of knowledge around the laws than an intentional violation of them. However, other than requiring mandatory boater education, we've been unsuccessful at the greater group of boaters to educate them by pushing out boating laws to them. So through this process over the next 5 years, we hope to get that message out to them. We especially saw an increase in some of the complaints during the pandemic, which again, didn't surprise us because a lot of new people went out and bought new boats and went out and launched them and kind of did what everybody else was doing, just followed the group in front of them. So we're just trying to figure out a way to get to most boaters who are on the water. And we found that making that mandatory is probably the best route. And again, it's not out in front. We're really behind the rest of the nation a little bit in this.
I guess I see it sort of like the hunter safety course. I think most hunters act, safely and responsibly, but still they have to have a hunter safety course to go out there and get a hunting license and hunt. So personally, I guess I see it something like that. So Representative Terrio.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. That was where I was going. I agree with Lester a lot. It really bothered me for a while. Like, I've been operating a boat for 50 years, but I went hunting in Colorado when I had to take a hunter safety course. And you know what? It's never a bad thing to learn something. It's always a good refresher. And at the end of the day, it's going to help everything. So as much as I don't care for punishing good people, this isn't a punishment. It's an opportunity to educate. I like what we're going to do. And I think what Colonel said, we're behind in this. And I think we need to get caught up. And I'm going to support this.
Other questions? Representative Landry.
To follow up, excuse me, with what Representative Terrio said, education never hurts anybody at all. And I agree. It's a good move. We've got an issue with the Kai's Pond because of PWC. Education may have helped keep that from being in front of us. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Ordway.
Well, to the hunter safety thing, I guess I'd have to say that we do have a grandfathering clause. I've had a hunting license for a great number of years, more than I care to mention. And I didn't take a hunter safety course. So we relied on having a license in the past was good enough. So there was a provision in that to cover people that were doing it. And again, I'm not saying I'm against this. I don't believe I am, but I'm torn about some of it.
Yeah. Sure. And I hear you on that, Representative, and probably that wasn't the best analogy, but I just remember taking the hunter safety course only because when my kids were old enough to start hunting, they had to take the hunter safety, and I took the hunter safety course with them because I just thought that was the right thing to do anyway. So, but I hear you, but I guess it's good to get some more education. Colonel Scott, you want to comment?
Yeah, just
on
to add to that thought, Representative Ordway is correct. I think it was 1976 if you had your hunting license prior to that. However, now where we started requiring hunter education after that, an entire generation has had hunter education. And I will say that the number of boating crashes and boating fatalities we have every year greatly outnumbers the number of hunting incidents and thank God fatals every year. So I do think that nationwide, the education does work. NASBA has statistics that show that. They also, I just thought about this as I was speaking, the Coast Guard has statistics that show that most people who are involved in boat crashes are between, I think the age was like 32 or 33 to 55. And that may be contingent upon the population of people who are running boats, but that is the data that's out there. So we do think it's a good direction to go. We've already had mandatory boater ed in place for personal watercrafts for a number of years now. But we also agree, jumping into it both feet for tomorrow isn't necessarily the way to go, but transitioning this in over 5 years will give many people the opportunity to ease into it. And depending on what size boat you run, you may never have to. However, as a department, we will likely, even if you operate a boat less than 25 horsepower, continue to message to those folks and push out to them that it's good to take boater education, because the laws change, the amount of traffic on the water, the density of the boaters on the water have changed over the years, and we expect that that's just going to continue to grow rather than become less. So it's, I think it's our approach to 5 years out was to try to help some of those people ease their way into it, so to speak.
Thank you. Representative Hepler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I I appreciate the thoughtfulness of crafting this proposed bill, and also the timeframe as Colonel Scott has recommended. I just really appreciate that.
Representative Ordway.
Okay, a softball, Colonel. Are there courses available now online, or when would we have something available so that someone could get we do this, and I guess we're going to, is there something available now so that we could get ahead of it? Or when would one be available?
So as we mentioned in the report back, we already have 4 courses available that have been available for a number of years, because the courses for the personal watercraft have been in place. We intend to revise some of those courses to make them even more main specific to certain issues, especially around invasive aquatic plants, et cetera. But there are a number of courses that are in place right now. We are encouraging the folks who have already taken those courses will, in fact, if you want to use the word grandfathering, because they're NASPLA certified courses, be grandfathered, but we're always continuing to improve those courses and add to them. And we have vendors that we're working with this year to bring the courses up to speed even more so. But like I said, the general boating laws nationwide, our current courses that are available and on the website today are sufficient towards that.
Representative Hepler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, one more piece of feedback is something that the Colonel just mentioned, is that seems like we're getting bills. There's a lot of opportunity or a lot of interest in dealing with invasive species. We had a bill last year, and seems like this would be a good way to take care of that without all the extra enforcement that might be needed. That the education, this might be a great way to uptick the education on invasive species.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none.
Can I make one clarification?
Yes, sir.
I think I confused some people last week in the report back, and I don't want to do it again today. I talk about 4 courses that we recommend and offer on our website. You don't need to take all 4 courses. There's just all the content of each course is more or less the same. Some people just learn better with more interactive courses. Some people like to read more. Some people like to watch videos. So you only need to take one of those courses. I didn't want people to think that there's 4 different courses you need to take.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Representative Hepler.
Hi, sorry, one more question coming from somebody who has canoes rather than motorboats. What are the rules about drunk boating? Are they the same as for automobiles?
More or less they're the same. You can't operate a watercraft while under the influence of at a 0.08, and we do enforce boating OUI. We have people who are specially trained, and not only in with alcohol, with drug-related boating as well. I think over the last few years, I know Deputy Commissioner reported out some statistics, but we get a little over 20 boating OUI apprehensions a year. I see there's 21 in 2019, 21 in 2018, and we have a mobile intoxilizer inside of one of our warden vehicles that we can bring around to boat ramps and different places where if we're having a special detail. And yes, OUI boating laws are very similar to motor vehicle laws, other than a license suspension, obviously, because it doesn't affect your driver's license.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion from someone. Representative Alley. Unmute yourself, sir. Still muted.
Yeah,
There we go. We can hear you now.
there, now I'll make a motion.
And you're moving what?
The,
Ought to
Voting?
pass? Yep, ought to pass or ought not to pass?
ought to pass.
Ought to pass on LD 1663 as amended,
I'll second that.
and it was seconded by Representative Terrio. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Darlene, would you please call the roll?
Okay, so the motion is ought to pass as amended.
Yes.
Okay, just double checking. Representative Blyford,
Ought to pass?
yeah, ought to pass as amended. Okay. Representative Mason,
Yes, ought to pass.
Representative Hepla,
Yes.
Senator Curry,
Senator Curry left, I guess.
left. Okay. Senator Black,
Yes.
Senator Dill,
Yes.
Representative Landry,
Yes.
Representative Terrio,
Yes,
Representative Danny Martin, is
Absent.
absent. Representative Ordway,
Humana. Yes.
Representative Alley,
Yes,
Representative Neto,
Yes.
and Representative John Martin is absent. 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, and 3 absent.
Okay, on LD 1663, it's ought to pass 10-03, and we will close the work session. Thank you, everyone. And now we'll move on to our public hearing on LD 1873, an act related to airboats. And who do we have?
Who is just going through this?
I was just looking to see who is,
Yeah, I am too.
Representative Melanie Sachs is the sponsor, and she should be here.
She
Okay.
was.
She could be
Oh,
promoted.
there
to-
she is. Here she is. We also have Deirdre Gilbert from the Marine Resources, who signed up like at the very last minute and probably isn't showing up on your list
okay,
as neither for or against.
all right.
And I have 2 David Coxes on the list. One of you needs to change your name. Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're good to go. Okay, I will then open the hearing on LD 1873, as I said, an act related to airboats. Remember, this is a public hearing, so if you can, remain muted until you're called upon to speak. I do have a timer. I do time you for 3 minutes. So at the end of 3 minutes, you'll hear the timer, or if you don't hear it, I will interrupt you and just ask you to finish up. And with that, please be respectful at all times to everybody. And we'll begin with Representative Sachs.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Senator Dill, Representative Landry, and the esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. My name is Representative Melanie Sachs. I represent House District 48, which includes Freeport and part of Pownell. And I'm here as the sponsor this morning of LD 1873, an act related to airboats. I'm honored to offer this legislation at the request of the members of the Airboat Stakeholder Group, whose mission and purpose were authorized by LD 114, which was passed during the first session of the 130th legislature. As you may remember, this group comprised of 3 commercial marine shellfish harvesters who operate airboats, 3 resident coastal property owners, 2 municipal marine shellfish officers, and 2 coastal municipal administrators have been working together for many months to bring forward consensus-based recommendations as directed by LD 114. These recommendations are included in detail in the IFW stakeholder report presented to this committee just a few days ago. The bill before you, LD 1873, proposes language which integrates these stakeholder recommendations into the existing statute as LD 114 directed. Please note that while I attended all the meetings this past summer and fall, including those hosted at sites with the outside expert, with many thanks to the IFW department for bringing in Warden Neal, neither I nor any legislator attending voted on these recommendations. These recommendations are indeed the result of the hard work and productive conversations by those most impacted by this issue, and all were endorsed either unanimously or by overwhelming majority of the group. So those recommendations include to extend the quote sunset date of the current law, LD 114, to September 30th of 2023. This will give more time to determine if the law is having the desired outcome and allow marine officials time to offer education to all parties about the statute. LD 114 did not become law until October 18th of 21, which did not allow adequate analysis or education to be done during the summer of 2021. The recommendations also request that they remove the decibel exemption for municipal government airboats, except for in cases of emergency when the decibel level measurement should not apply. Please note that the draft, and again, if you remember, you had the stakeholder hearing back on Wednesday, worked very hard with the wonderful analyst of your committee, but we just didn't get the full communication and draft together until this weekend. So please note that the draft I received from the analyst did not include language that allowed for emergency exemptions. I've put that in my draft so that you have it, as it was the intent of the stakeholder group to have an exemption for emergency situations. The recommendations also ask that the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife examine if funding sources are available to offer financial assistance to airboat owners to help them come into compliance with current laws and rules related to noise, and for funding to secure boat access site through sources such as Land for Maine Futures. This group acknowledged the needs for these funding elements, but did not have the expertise of the government department resources to identify possible sources. And finally, to report out results. The initial draft of the bill included only a report back to the committee on funding research. The stakeholder group has committed to continue to meet and work cooperatively to monitor the progress of the initiative, which the current legislation allows if the sunset date is extended. Thus, a report back to this committee, not only detailing the funding research, but also the results of additional working data gathered throughout the year, is entirely appropriate. It has truly been my pleasure to see this issue continue to evolve through the productive and positive efforts of this group, and believe that these consensus-based recommendations continue to move the work forward. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time and also during the work session. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Sachs? All right. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next is Representative Arkwood.
Yes, Senator Dill, first of all, I'm very happy to be before your committee. It's my first time before you, and this is an honor. Senator Dill, Representative Landry, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. My name is Poppy Arford, and I'm proud to represent House District 49, which includes part of Brunswick and encompasses the Maquoit Bay Mere Point working waterfront and residential community. I am testifying today as a co-sponsor of LD 1873 in support of the amendment as presented by my respective colleague, Representative Melanie Sachs. This bill is, as you have just heard, this bill is the product of the hard work of a stakeholder group with diverse interests and backgrounds, representing Brunswick, Harpswell, and Freeport. I want to stress how much I respect and appreciate the group and the chairs, Lieutenant Luce and Sergeant Dean, for their commitment to finding solutions and reaching agreement on the recommendations contained in the IFW stakeholder report, which is the basis for the bill amendment. The stakeholder group addressed the very real and ongoing tension between the shoreline property owners and the shellfish harvesters, whose livelihood depends on timely access to mudflats, their harvesting grounds. The demand for residential development along the coast of Maine has made such access more and more challenging. Airboats are a solution which allow for greater access in being able to travel longer distances safely and in a timely manner. To everyone's credit, The stakeholder group was successful in developing the recommendations through a process made possible by the members' willingness to listen and learn from one another. Thank you all. Looking ahead, passing LD 1873, which extends the sunset date, looking ahead at passing LD 1873, which extends the sunset date and work of the stakeholder group, will allow for the ongoing study of noise levels and other issues contained in the current report. A second report back to the IFW committee with recommendations based on what is learned during the 2022 shellfish harvesting season is needed. To ensure success, adequate funding for the airboat modifications needed to reduce noise levels must also be secured. Thank you for your consideration of my testimony. It is appreciated, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Representative Ordway.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Good morning, Representative. I guess this is the second time I heard funding for modifications. Just my thought is, the prior representative asked for IF&W to fund the modifications. I was wondering why this wasn't in marine resources.
I am not knowledgeable as to that. In order to answer that question, I am guessing that either Representative Sachs or other members of your committee or experts involved with this bill will be able to, but this is what I can say. In my committee, Healthcare, Insurance, and Financial Services, we have had requests for funding other professions, especially during COVID, which has made, as we all know, everything much more challenging, especially financially for a number of different professions in our state. And I view the harvesters that work here in my community as a profession deserving of the same support as all the other medical professions, the teaching professions, the transportation professions, the housing professions receive. And that's why I included that in my testimony, just as a request that this committee and the resources that are attached to this committee be reviewed to see if there is any possible avenue for funding for these very much needed modifications if we are to succeed at reducing the noise levels successfully. So that's the best answer I can give you, but I think it's a great question.
Representative Ordway.
Oh, there we go. I don't disagree. They're professionals, and I want to support them all I can, and I will. It was just that question of funding. It was mentioned that it come from IF&W, and my concern is that if that's in the bill, I just want to know why it wouldn't go to marine resources instead of funding from IFW if it's available.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Commissioner, are you commenting for the department?
Thanks, Senator Dill. I think actually Deirdre Gilbert is in the waiting room. If we could bring her forward, I think she's gonna bring forward a joint statement.
Sounds good.
She's actually in the neither list, so do you want me to wait till then or pull her in now?
No, if she's speaking for the department, we'll have her come in now.
Now? Okay.
Yep.
She comes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Dill, Representative Landry, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. I am Deirdre Gilbert. I'm the Director of State Marine Policy at DMR. And as Commissioner Camuso mentioned, I'm actually testifying on behalf of both agencies on LD 1873. As the committee is aware, you heard a presentation on January 19th that outlined the recommendations of the Airboat Stakeholder Working Group. Both the Department of Marine Resources and Inland Fish and Wildlife support the recommendation to delay the sunset provision that's in the existing law. We do ask that the existing law enforcement exemption remain in statute. Finally, on the point of the funding, both agencies have explored, knowing that this was an interest of the stakeholder working group, we have explored existing opportunities for funding for this purpose and have not found anything that would fit the bill. And for that reason, we would recommend that neither agency be asked to report a year from now on that finding. If there is a desire to provide funding for this type of purpose, I think our recommendation is that that needs to be created somehow. We don't believe it's out there just waiting to be located. And those were our three main points on the bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Representative Lightfoot. You're muted, Representative.
Thank you. The existing laws now are that the airboats have to have a muffler, and the decimals are between 7 and 75 decimals. Is that what you want to continue if we don't put a sunset down on this?
That's correct. There is an existing sunset, and I think the recommendation of the working group was to push that out a year so that additional information could be collected.
And the funding, boy, I'm certainly not in favor of that. We're going to start funding everybody's business throughout the state. I'm very much opposed to that. So thank you.
Representative Hepler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deirdre. Can you explain some of the context about this emergency exemption for, or exemption for emergency vehicles, some of the background?
Sure, and I think actually it may be helpful to hear from the co-chairs of the working group on that point. I did kind of check in this morning to get a better understanding of that rationale. I think it was originally included understanding that state and municipally owned airboats are frequently used for public good, such as rescues or other activities that you wouldn't want to constrain their ability to operate the airboat however they would need to. My understanding, and I wasn't present for these conversations, is that there was some conversation amongst the existing airboat users, i.e. the clammers that use the boats, that if they needed to control the decibel limits, then so should everybody else. There shouldn't be an exemption for the state and municipally owned vessels. I know that some of those vessels can be some of the louder vessels, and they are working on doing what they can to mitigate that noise. But I think it kind of came down just to the idea that if you're trying to act in the public good, you shouldn't necessarily be constrained by those decibel limits.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next two people to speak are in favor is Chris Green and David Cox, and we hope we have the real David Cox. So that, Chris Green.
Hello, nice to meet you guys. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I do believe we need a lot more research and data collected on this so we can move forward with something reasonable for everybody. Just hasn't been enough time. I think we've made a lot of headway. I think everybody's being a lot more responsible out there due to the workshop that's been going on and spreading the good word. So otherwise than that, yeah, we need to extend the sunset to learn a little more.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions? My quick question for you then, so what I'm hearing you say is what you'd like to hear is what we should do is just extend where we are right now rather than doing any of these other recommendations and then come back in a year with a new bill or whatever. Is that what I'm hearing, Chris?
Yeah, that's exactly right now. I think, we've kind of highlighted, and like Melanie highlighted some things that we're kind of looking at and leaning toward. But at the end of the day, I mean, we just need more data to be collected, more education to be done on both sides, riparian and of course the airboat operators and law enforcement for that matter. So yeah, that's exactly what my recommendations are if we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or for Chris? All right, thank you for your testimony. David Cox.
Yes. Hi, I think I'm the only David Cox. But
well, there's just two on my screen, so.
yeah, I see them as well. Okay, Senator Dill, Representative Landry, and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Thank you for the opportunity to come back and speak with you all again. I am Dave Cox, town representative from Brunswick on the stakeholder consensus group, speaking for myself and my two peers, Spike Heibel and Dan Walker from Harpswell and Freeport, respectively. First, we want to call out huge thanks and praise to Sergeant Dean from DMR and Lieutenant Luce from IFW for their co-leadership on the consensus group. They were always thoughtful, patient, impartial, conscientious, and skillful at managing the highly disparate positions of the group, and their work paid off. With the exception of just a few municipal representatives, we reached overwhelming consensus, which represents the key elements of Representative Sachs' proposed bill. We did not start in a collaborative state. When we first assembled as a group 1 year ago, we were frankly all hunkered down in our respective corners. Harvesters feeling threatened and cornered, residents feeling ignored and frustrated, and several government officials without a clear way forward to a solution. Fast forward to last month, we have, dare I say, bonded as a group. Force any group of folks into many meetings, more recently face-to-face instead of via Zoom, and you start to build trust by getting to know each other better and having more appreciation of each other's situations. Sergeant Dean and Lieutenant Luce brought in Mike Neal, the conservation warden from Wisconsin, an impressive airboat expert, to teach us a ton about airboats. Bottom line, we learned there is a whole lot that can be done to optimize airboats to be a lot quieter, something that both harvesters and coastal residents want. Since those learnings did not get confirmed until the fall, when most airboats were wrapping up for the season, we did not get an opportunity to get traction on implementing those recommendations. It's like we are in the second inning of a baseball game without a 1 year extension of the current sunset provision and the continuation of the stakeholder group efforts. We will not get through the game to determine what reasonable decibel limits are achievable. We also want to reinforce the need for government airboats to need to comply, except in emergencies, and the securing of financing, wherever it may be, for airboat upgrades to become less noisy and to help enable collaboration, such as with the University of Maine Engineering School and the Maine Technology Institute on longer-term technology solutions. These are both key dependencies to success. And finally, we need to continue to focus on efforts to solve the access issue, which is what originally contributed to getting us in the current situation. Thank you. Please, please support Representative Sachs' bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lyford. You're muted, Representative.
Yes, thank you. I would ask, you would like to see the airboat noise reduced. There is now laws in place with decimals. What decimal are you seeking to lower it to?
So we have a framework of decibels that are stipulated in the current law that has the sunset, and we need data. We need to, we have just, what I didn't mention is that there's also getting alignment on sound meters and training and making sure that we're all speaking from the same hymn book, if you will, on when you measure airboat noise, that we're all aligned on what those results are. And so we really need the next year to measure airboats in more real life situations and to give the harvesters time to implement the myriad of recommendations that were made by the expert from Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Landry.
Thank you, Senator Dill. Good morning, Mr. Cox. It sounds like you guys have made a lot of headway, worked well together. It all looks fine. Again, the problem is going to be the money. As municipalities, do you have a working group, or have you folks looked into any sources of funding or grants? Because we know darn well when if we pass this bill as written and it goes to the appropriations table, it'll probably die and the whole thing will be in vain. Have you folks worked on anything?
We again, to my analogy about the second inning of the baseball game, we've really just reached the point where we've aligned on these recommendations, including, should the money come from in order to be able to achieve success. So to answer your question specifically, no, we have not yet.
Let's hope we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Ordway.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Cox, and the whole stakeholders group for meeting. And if I could editorialize for a second, did you say that by meeting face to face instead of on Zoom, that's when you really started to work together and come together face to face?
That would be my personal observation, but in fairness to providing full context, we also, when we got the information and we got the training from the expert from Wisconsin, that also contributed to greatly, I believe, letting the data really drive us to really understanding what the challenge is and what's possible going forward.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next is Daniel Devereaux, followed by Gina Leduc Coons. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Dill, Representative Landry, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Inland Fish and Wildlife. I'm reporting live from sunny Daytona Beach, but it's also about 35 degrees down here this morning when I woke up. So my attempt to get out of the cold and into the warm for a week or so didn't work. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you guys today. My name is Daniel Devereaux. I'm the Coastal Resource Manager for the town of Brunswick, and I'm testifying today in opposition to two parts of LD 1873. I don't want my opposition testimony to downplay the hard work that the stakeholder group has gone through, because as Mr. Cox indicated, and Representative Sachs and Representative Arford, they've done amazing work, and the wardens that ran the consensus had a tough job, and they did some really good work. So prior to being the Coastal Resource Manager with the town of Brunswick, I was the Harbor Master and Marine Resource Officer for the town. I retired from that public safety position in 2018 after 20 plus years of service. I have thousands of hours behind the stick as an airboat operator. And I'm also a member of the stakeholder group, as I mentioned. I also have a really unique perspective because I live about 1,000 feet from McQuaid Bay Landing, which is probably the hottest spot where most of the airboats launch in Brunswick, the smaller ones anyway. So I'm very familiar with their noise. The town of Brunswick has maintained an airboat in its fleet of service vehicles since the 1980s. It serves as a critical public safety equipment. We've saved lives with it. We've recovered evidence. We've done some pretty amazing things. We also use the airboat pretty consistently on the mud flats throughout the growing season, what we call the growing season, April to October or November, surveying our flats. The town uses the airboat to do spring shellfish assessment surveys where we go out and we look at the health of the beds. We take population surveys. We look at the densities of clams. And we've done that here in the town of Brunswick for about 40 years. And it's really important part of shellfish management because it supports the ecological health of soft bottom habitats, salt marshes, eel grasses, and everything else. So based on all of that experience that I have operating the town's airboat, I think it's really hard to maintain a threshold of 75 dBs, especially over when you're traveling over open water. So that's one part that I didn't like in the report out, and I don't think we supported it initially. It's unfortunate, but shellfish harvesters have to follow the tides in the summer time. There are many really good tides prior to 7 a.m. Having that 75 dBs, if it was strictly enforced, I'm sure it could very likely impact the livelihoods of some harvesters, particularly those, like I said, that travel over open water, that have much more drag, have to RPM up to get on top of the water. So it also would impact our ability at the town as a resource management division of our town. We take shellfish management seriously. We have 1,600 acres of growing area. We have a $13 million economy. We employ over 115 local people. It's really, really, really an important industry to maintain and monitor. And I think we've done that over the years in the municipal shellfish program's existence. So I'm all for, learning more about how we can dampen the noise. I know that there's a lot of ways to dampen noise. I've talked to manufacturers down here in Florida. So I just think that we should exhaust those efforts before we set such a low decibel level that ultimately, if it's strictly enforced, could impact shellfish harvesters. So, and our opportunity to maintain our continued monitoring programs over the mudflat. So with that said, I appreciate this opportunity to come and supply testimony and would be happy to answer any questions the committee members may have.
Thank you. Representative Lightfoot.
Thank you, Senator. My understanding was 7 to 7, it was 75 decimals, but you could leave that and go up to 90 if it required going out or coming in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think what the intention is that you have to get the boat up and running when you're on the mud flats. So once it's running, it's very slick and you can almost let off the accelerator and coast. But you can't do that on the water where there's much more drag. And we do have several shellfish harvesters that operate and go out around Mere Point in rough water, and they have to gear up and power up to do that, and that creates noise. So
thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
No, that does answer my question. Thank you.
Representative Hepler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Dan, for being here. So let me clarify. You do you want to keep the decibel exemption for the municipal governments, regardless of whether it's an emergency or not? Did I understand that correctly?
Well, yeah, I would like it to exempt research and academia and shellfish management, essentially what we do to try to keep our flats healthy. I mean, cutting out 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of those big tides in the morning at 7 a.m. because I know we can't operate under that. I know our town airboat cannot operate under that 75 dBs, particularly when we're going out over water. So, yeah, it's important for us as shellfish managers to be able to use those tools.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Landry.
Thank you, Senator Dill. Thank you for being here, Dan. Very insightful. What decibel level would you suggest for open water?
Well, I think the 90 decibel level, like I said in the stakeholder group, I think setting that 90 decibel level and then moving forward you know, giving that 90 a year and to see where you can operate on, because we're enacting laws. Really, I mean, if they were strictly enforced, I'm not sure how strictly enforced the laws are going to be. I'm not sure there's going to be a warden at the landing all summer long with a essentially a decibel gun pointing out, taking people's decimals coming in. But if it's a law, it can be enforced. And like Spike Heibel said in the working group, he's like, well, we need a stick. And I don't necessarily believe in that concept. So in other words, we need to, if somebody's going to be a jerk and operate in the morning, we're going to call, have a warden come down, and then we're going to use our stick, which is the 75 dBs. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
Are we more worried about the inshore, or you're talking about going around Mere Point out on open water? Is the open water away from shore a problem?
Yeah, it is. I mean, because airboats they're not great open water vehicles. Matter of fact, they're scary as hell when you got a little bit of chop. And so they power up and they have to hug the shoreline to stay in the lee to get down some of these areas when it's a little windy out. Because when people that have boated, and you come around the corner of a peninsula, it can go from calm to really rough real quick. So they stay sort of close. So, that in and of itself generates some issues.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Representative Ordway.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks, Mr. Devereaux. And I'm just going to have to say that I agree with you on the 90 decibels. I mean, 90 decibels is the limit that we use now for motorcycles. And if I don't know, the 75 decibels to me does not make sense. If somebody can go past your house on the water or on the mud flats at 75 decibels and then go down the road at 90 decibels on the Harley, doesn't make sense to me. So I would definitely agree with you on the 90 decibels.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. All right, next up, neither for nor against, Gina. Can you hear me, Gina?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Hi, my name is Gina Leduc Kuntz. I'm a resident of Freeport, Maine, and I'm also on the Freeport Shellfish Commission. Thank you for having me, allowing me to testify before you today. I've sent in my written testimony. I won't read that off to you, but if you have it before you now, you can see that I'm a part of a fishing community, fishing family, and have been so for over 30 years. I have firsthand experienced the tsunami of regulations that have been placed on Maine fishermen and the sometimes unforeseen consequences that have really impacted our fishing communities socially and economically. I would ask you, although I said I'm neither for or against this bill, I understand that this committee has the ability to report out its own bill and would request that you do that and include more stakeholders in this conversation. I support the idea of extending the sunset on the current regulations to September 30th of 2023. But I'd also recommend bringing in more stakeholders into this conversation, including the shoreside supports for the clammers, which involve the dealers and the restaurants and everyone who will be impacted by this legislation, potential legislation. As the previous gentleman testified, lowering the decibels to a certain below 90 could have unforeseen, well, what if the clamor has to leave at an earlier tide? and how will the clammers modify their boats to achieve this lower decibel level? We've already heard that there's no sources on the state or federal level to sources of funding on the state or federal level to help the clammers modify their boats. We have been exploring through the Freeport Shellfish Commission private funding to assist at least Freeport clammers to modify their boats. But the funding is going to be very critical to all the clammers, and the clammers are already under significant economic stress. Here in Freeport, we just had to recently modify our licensing rules to allow non-Freeport residents apply for a a clamming license, because many of the Freeport clammers cannot afford to reside in Freeport. So there had to be an accommodation made for that. So keeping in mind that funding is going to be critical, prematurely implementing lower decibel levels will potentially severely socially and economically impact clammers through the state of Maine. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And that pretty much concludes my testimony. I don't know if you have any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony. Darlene, is that it?
I believe so. That's all I have on my list.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing on LD 1873, and we will move on from there. Thank you, everybody, for your comments this morning. Julia, anything left for us for today?
That is everything we have for today, Senator Dill.
Okay, Representative Landry, anything you have? You're muted, so you're all set, okay. Senator Black has his hand up.
Thank you, Senator Dill. What have can you refresh my memory of what we have voted out? Have we got anything voted out of committee yet? What is our status?
Julia.
Yes. So we have voted out, if you mean by reported out, is the civil trespass bill, and which is Resolve 77. And then we also have scheduled a second hearing for the antlerless deer, which is 116, because there's such significant changes. And then so those are the ones we've reported out. And then of course we voted today on boating safety, if that answers your question.
Is that it? Okay, Darlene, anything else for us?
No, I don't think so. Other than you might have me again later on this week if you're meeting.
Oh, boy.
Lucky you.
With that, I think we have chairs and leads. Julia, after this, you will set us up on the meeting. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn? It's been moved by Representative Terrio, seconded by Representative Landry. All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Darlene, you can